All right. Hope you're having a good weekend, everybody. This is the overview. It's sort of a video tutorial of getting started on Assessment Audit 1, your first assignment for TCH 495. Just an FYI to start, I'm using an app called Screencast-O-Matic. So if you ever have to teach online or you're doing flipped instruction, what's nice about this is you can see is one, I can record what's on my screen, make it kind of like a PowerPoint, right? And then two is I can record audio over the top of it, so it's a presentation. I have two goals in this presentation. One is for you to understand the assignment, right? We're going to go back over it really quickly. And the second is to comprehend how to get started on the assessment. So I'm going to walk you through getting rolling on it. This is from the assessment handout. And by the way, if you don't have D2L up, do so as I'm going through this. It's pretty important that that you have access to the materials I refer to, and feel free, and I'm going to tell you to stop at particular points during this. So I'm going to walk through these steps. These are the steps that you're going to take before you actually conduct the analysis piece. And before I do that, I just want to reiterate the purpose of why we're doing this assessment. The most obvious reason is that these tests are, whether you like it or not, really important, right? They're important because they determine your students whether they can get into the college they want to, or college at all. In many cases, they define the school's quality, and they're often used as national benchmarks, both for state progress and national progress. So we kind of need to know what's on them, not only just because of the weight that they carry, but also because they are representations about what it means to be proficient or knowledgeable in your particular subject area. And I'll be honest with you, as a more practical aspect to it, we also need a buffer. I want to give you some time to get into your field sites, get to know your mentor teacher, and this gives us an opportunity to do some work around assessment without asking a ton of you or your mentor teacher at the outset. Okay. First and foremost, when we're thinking about this list, is about determining your interest and focus area. I want to reiterate again, you are not comparing the entire test. You are not comparing the AP to the ACT. What you're actually doing is you're zooming inside of a particular area of interest, might even be concern, you have around your aspects of your content area that are tested. Okay? And so that might be something like you might be interested in or thinking about how writing is done in math. You might be thinking about the ACT science test you took as a high school kid and still have nightmares about those visual that you experienced when you took that test. It doesn't, what matters is that you zoom in on some aspect and you get a better sense of what it's asking kids to do, so you have a better sense of how to teach it. So there's four areas really you could focus on to help you determine your focus area. The first is content, and that is, what are they actually asking kids to do around your content area? So that could be looking at specifically at questions about earth science or geometry, or when there's a text on literary text, what kids are asked to do with a literature text. It could be the skill they're asked to utilize, right? It could be like data analysis, looking at like a data table, for instance. It could be geography or map reading for a social studies assessment, and it could be something like inferencing or recognizing vocabulary and context. That might be something that interests you. Another example, another way of focusing is on the item type, right? It could be that you're particularly interested in what kids are asked to do on the essays, right? The on-demand timed component. So that you might want to be curious to know about, well, what does a performance assessment look like on these standardized tests as well? And then finally, another aspect is the test format or design. And I use the term stimuli just to refer to something that kids are supposed to use to answer questions. And that could be a text, right? It could be an excerpt, or it could be like a visual, like those science problems in the ACT, or it could be a map that they have to work with to analyze or answer questions. So I want you to pause here, and I want you to look at that list, and I want you to think about your own interest or points of clarity that you need when thinking about teaching your subject area. And I want you to just pause this and think about some ideas you might have. And then when you're ready, you have some focus ideas, then let's move forward. So once you've done that, the first place really to start is the SAT. Every high school student has to take this, so regardless about what your content area is, you might want to look to see how that skill or content area or knowledge or performance is displayed or assessed on the SAT. So you can go to the SAT site, download some sample items. From there, I'd reach out to your mentor teacher and see as soon as possible if you can have a conversation about what kinds of assessments he or she and his or her department or school are implementing and administering to students. Try to get materials from that. So if there's a shared final or there's a school-wide writing exam and you're interested in that, try to get a couple of samples of that, but also get some detail from them about what they are. And while you're waiting for that conversation to happen, I would encourage you to peruse your school's website or your district's website to find out more about the assessments. That stuff has to be made public because it's how people monitor schools. So, and you'll see that I've included the CPS assessment document on D2L. So once you've got some initial ideas about how to move forward, I would identify additional assessments. And if you go to the D2L page, you can see, I put arrows by it, there's multiple ways to do so. I've included a list of secondary assessments, right? It's from Connecticut, but it's pretty exhaustive in terms of the number and kinds of assessments on it. I've also included links to some of the major assessments on that assessment links page. And I've included the CPS framework, which I'm telling you, don't sleep on it. It includes a list of all of the assessments kids take that include science and math and other forms, alternative assessments as well. This one's from 2016, but other than the fact that the park and high schools have been replaced by SAT, it has remained the same. So after you've done that, I would continue to look at sample items, see what interests you, see which ones address your focus area, and select 3. And again, remember, you need one or two to be summative, i.e., and from like summative standardized tests, such as the ACT, AP, SAT, IB, what have you. And one or more need to be less high stakes, but more common shared assessments, such as a school final, such as a diagnostic assessment, like some of the ones we talked about in class on Thursday. It could be an interim assessment. See the handout for the assignment, and there's a list of examples. So here's how I'm telling you to get started. Look at each assessment individually first. Don't try to do a cross comparison. Focus on each one bit by bit, and then use that to do the cross analysis. So what I would suggest doing is using the graphic organizer here that's on there. And again, in the D2L folder, you'll see it says Analysis Tool. That's the Microsoft Word document. You can write directly in it. So this tool, you can see, go through, has like individual elements that you can record assessment on the left-hand column and go from there. So in this case, we're going to look at an example. It's the SAT essay prompt. And so let's say I'm particularly interested in those in high school performance assessments. So you can see here that the prompt has a couple of features. I didn't include all of it, but I included enough so you got an idea about what's on it. And one of the things you can see is that it's a extended response. Kids are asked to write an essay, you can see down below. But it asks you to read a passage, right? And I've included the title here so you can see one of the details is it is from a New York Times article, which means it's going to be nonfiction. And it includes an excerpt. It's about 600 to 800 words. It's typical for an SAT piece. And then afterwards, they give you instructions about what kind of essay to write. And you can see it says to build an argument to persuade its audience. And then below it says the essay shouldn't be about whether you agree with the claims, but it should be about how those claims are made. So when we go into this chart, we can see that in assessment details, we can identify that, hey, we have to write one extended response. It's a explanatory, and it's what we would call a rhetorical analysis. We're not being asked to write an argument. We're being asked to analyze the rhetoric or the written word, right? And we're being asked to analyze it for evidence, for style, and for the development of the argument, i.e. the reasoning. So we can note those things here in the assessment details column, right? And that we can note that there's a nonfiction text that's provided, and that we have to write an extended essay analyzing the rhetoric. So the other piece here is around standards being addressed. So I want to point out how to do that, which is you need to go look at the standards and figure out what is it that you're looking at. And in this case, SAT is a Common Core test. We're looking at a writing assessment, so we know Common Core ELA. So, but it's also got a reading component. So I'm going to go into the Common Core, and I've got that up on D2L. And I'm going to notice that write explanatory text is right here to examine and convey complex ideas. That sounds about right. So I'd want to look at these and see which standards are addressed. But I also want to look at the reading ones as well. So I'm going to head back here. And you're going to see right here, I know it's an 11 to 12 test because it's a college admissions test. And we're going to see, because it's a craft and structure exam, it's asking me to analyze elements, the rhetorical elements. I'm going to highlight these. These seem to be some of the areas in which I'm expected to analyze. This one too as well. So I'm going to identify those standards in the chart here. But then I also need to think about the cognitive demand piece as well. And so I want to just point out something. It's called the Hess rigor matrix, and there's a link on D2L. And it's going to link you to this piece here, and you can see that there's multiple options here. There's different content areas, etc. And the rigor matrix looks like this. And the columns, the rows are for Bloom's taxonomy. We mentioned it in class on Thursday. Bloom's taxonomy just orders the cognitive complexity or difficulty of certain kinds of tasks. So if you're looking from top to bottom, remembering something is the least demanding cognitive task. And if you scroll down here, evaluate, create, right, to judge something is the most cognitively rich task. And then on the columns is what's called Webb's depth of knowledge, right? It's basically Bloom's taxonomy. There's 4 levels, and you can see here it goes from recall, remember, to extended thinking. They're basically the same thing. But what Diana Hess has done here is that these descriptions give you examples of tasks that reflect that level of thinking. So when you're going to look in this, and you're going to look for where you see the level. Like, what is it that kids are actually being asked to do here, right? And one thing that I noticed about this one is, like, this particular task is right here. It's at the Analyze Level 3 level. Analyze impact of a use of author's craft in a single text. Seems about right, right? So I'm going to record that. And I might notice I don't have additional patterns yet to observe. I might come back to that. But those could be any other things that you're noticing of significance. So when you get to the cross case part, here's the key. The first thing you want to do is look at the organization of each test, compare them, notice any patterns, and then put the tests next to one another and compare how they look. See how they're similar and how they're different when you look at the design. And I've given you 2 examples here. These are examples of a constructed response essay items on 2 teacher certification tests. One is the Praxis, which is the one to the right. That many states give the Praxis. And the one on the left is the one you'll have to take in Illinois. It's the Illinois Professional Licensure Examination. So if you take a look at these tests, if I'm doing this, I'm interested in constructive response on teacher certification texts. I'm going to read these 2 things, and I'm going to try to see, like, where's my point in which I want to zoom in on the analysis and sort of think about what's sticking out to me. So, one obvious difference between these two of these as you look is one's asking you to pull from your own practice, and one is asking you to discuss a case study. The one on the right, I didn't share the case study, but you can see that Mr. Payton thing right there. It's referring to, you would read a passage like you would read on the SAT that describes an instructional scenario. So, but one of the things that stands out to me in the similarity, and I want to point out, you don't have to just look for similarities. If there's massive differences, talk about those differences. But one of the ahas when looking at these 2 tests is that both ask you to describe a strategy in response to the situation, right? The one on the left says 1, the one on the right says 2, right? But they're looking for strategies or solutions to the particular problem. And so, one of the ahas that I have looking at this is that there really has to be this you have to have this toolkit in your mind that you're drawing from in order to pull strategies out that might fit the particular scenario. And I'm going to scroll down a bit, or I can't, sorry. But if you look at the second or third bullet here, you can see you have to also explain why the strategy is effective, right? So you're going to also need to be able to, you need to know what is best practice. So we need to be